Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to First and Short. Today is November 2nd, Sunday. We just wrapped up a pretty exciting week 10. We got a lot to talk about. First of all, this is Aaron. I am Mashfik. Appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate you guys subscribing. Once again, just a quick plug. If you guys could subscribe real quick before we get into today's information, that would be really appreciative. We do have a lot to talk about, so we won't wait for you there. Just press that button and we'll go ahead and get started. Hugh Freeze just got fired. Today's episode is coming a little late. It was worth it. It was worth the wait, Aaron. Hugh Freeze was just announced that he is no longer the head coach at Auburn. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll talk about how week 10 kind of shook out, right? Not as many upsets as we originally thought, but there were still a lot of exciting games and moments to talk about there. And then the first CFP rankings and bracket is going to be announced on Tuesday. So we just want to put our prediction in there. We're going to see how we fare in that regard and give you an idea of what the committee might decide will be the order. So first things first, the biggest news, I think, Auburn's head coach Hugh Freeze has been fired. Aaron, I know you had some more information on that. Let us know what you know.
Yeah, I mean, first things first, another one bites the dust.
Yep.
Feels like every weekend we see just another coach getting their own news and their Sunday meetings with their staff and
Yep.
college, right? And so yeah, Hugh Freeze after 2+ seasons, he's no longer the coach at Auburn. I think he finished with a 15-19 record. Yeah, and it's got to be frustrating for both Hugh Freeze and the fan base in very different ways. So on one end, you have a fan base who has seen, losses in 5 out of the last 6 games. I mean, I don't care who you are, what type of standards you have for your team. That's miserable to go through, right?
Yeah. That Kentucky loss was not, I mean, I get it, but that was a tough loss. That counts as 2
Yeah,
losses.
exactly. And these losses, they came after a somewhat promising 3-0 start to the season. So you're just like, what the heck? Like, what is our identity, this year? Um, and, after seeing what the athletic director, John Cohen, said, you can understand why the decision was made. You can also understand why the decision was made when you have a student section at a game yelling "Fire Freeze," at your games now, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it just seemed like it was only a matter of time. But yeah, the AD, John Cohen, he went on to say this today, and I quote, our expectations for Auburn football are to annually compete for championships and search for the next leader of Auburn football begins immediately. So yeah, very frustrating. But I mean, with that, he set a standard now, right? He wants somebody who's going to be able to compete for those championships year in, year out. On the other end, you have the point of view of Hugh Freeze. He's attempting to, mold and build a team who really hasn't, been great since, I don't know, the middle of the Gene Chizik, Gus Malzahn era. So we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about a team that really hasn't been good/great in almost a decade, right? I mean, that's a lot of rebuilding, a lot to ask for. I mean, this season was maybe going towards the same, outcome or output that you've seen in the past year. So it's not like he got worse as a program, right? Um, he did an outstanding job this offseason, getting players out of the portal and trying to, you know, move the team in the right direction in terms of weapons they needed on offense and defense. And we saw some changes that were impactful. I guess they just weren't impactful enough. Um, these 5 or 6 of the last games that they lost, they were decided by 10 points or less, and
Mm-hmm.
they were
Mm-hmm.
against teams like UGA, Texas A&M, Mizzou, and Oklahoma. So all teams that are still alive in the college football playoff race. Um, you know, which I mean, it's amazing. It's great to be able to compete like that. But I'm gonna say the same quote that I've heard growing up. I feel like it can be applied here perfectly, right? Almost doesn't count. The standard was made clear by the athletic director, and it doesn't matter how close you are to beating a team, no matter how great they are. It's just, did you win?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
So the John Cohen, the athletic director, he's looking for a new coach.
Mhm.
Obviously the expectation is what you said in his quote, competing for championships, blah blah blah. I don't know. In my opinion, they're fully focused on being a basketball school, but if he wants to if he wants to sell this dream that they can also compete in football, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Um, who do you think they go after at this point? Obviously, there's a lot of openings. The Auburn job, where does that fall in the pecking order? Blah blah blah. Who do you think
Yep.
he goes for at this point?
That's right. Auburn joins the chat. There's about like 9 or 10 different openings and vacancies right now. And so with that, I don't think Auburn is just the top candidate that's going to get the top, coach that's looking for a new job, right? Some options that I saw that are pretty, pretty doable, pretty obtainable for them, maybe. I saw, James Franklin being a potential candidate, of course.
I like
I
that
don't
one.
know. Yeah, I don't know where he's expressed interest, but I know he wants to get back out and get back to coaching. You got John Summerall at Tulane. He's a good option. He's turned the team around. I saw Brent Key from Georgia Tech,
Mm,
but I don't know if that's real or fluff.
yeah, Brent Key. That sounds like something. That sounds like a name an agent would put out there just to try and get his client some more money.
Hmm. Not a bad marketing tactic.
Yeah.
Tactic. His team's the hottest team right now.
Use the back channels to like, yeah, I heard Brent Key is trying. Yeah, no way.
Yeah. And then, another name I saw, Kenny Dillingham from Arizona State. He's done good with that team, and he'd be a good candidate just because he's been a guy to compete for championships. He won the Big
Mm,
12 last year and
yep.
took his team pretty far in the college football playoffs last year. So, not a bad candidate.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Cool. Okay, continue down that road. You wanna have some type of consistency. You want to build something at Auburn, right? Like, there are players in the program now that are staples that you don't want to lose that traction. You don't want to lose all the good things that Hugh Freeze has been able to do from a recruiting standpoint. Who are some of the players that you have to make sure don't leave in the transfer portal?
Yeah. So, you definitely don't want to lose your weapons like wide receiver Cam Coleman. We saw him have a great performance against Georgia. And then you got the leading receiver on the year, Eric Singleton Jr. I think he's got one more year of eligibility after this year. So you don't want to
Mm,
lose your weapons that you worked so hard to get last year. I'm sure there's plenty of players in that defense you don't want to lose. Because, I mean, in the span of SEC games they've been playing in, I mean, I don't think they've allowed more than 15, 20 points, and that's pretty
good
outstanding against
defense,
an
yeah.
SEC offense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool,
So
cool. Well, that's another interesting one to watch. I'm sure this postseason will be lots of change. Lots of change as coaches move. I'm sure some players will move as well. That'll be something to watch out for. So, in any case, let's get into how week 10 went for us. Overall, based on our picks from last week, Aaron went 7 and 10, 7 of 10. I went 6 of 10. The tiebreaker was the SMU Miami game. Somehow he knew that was going to happen. Some of the bad beats on our side, again, Miami and Vanderbilt. Honestly, well, we didn't know Arch was going to play. We didn't know Arch was coming back from his concussion protocol, and they started to look like the Texas team that, that number one preseason team. So, yeah, that was a bad beat there with Vanderbilt. I thought the biggest surprise was Tennessee. Uh, at home, they had all the fanfare with the whole Halloween thing, blackout jerseys. Oklahoma's been looking pretty mid last few weeks. That was a big surprise for me that Tennessee lost like that. So yeah, we'll get started with number 18 Oklahoma at Tennessee. Obviously, Oklahoma was able to win 33-27. Um, Even though Tennessee went all out with the Halloween theme, things got pretty spooky for them, by halftime. The big story here was obviously Josh Heupel. Uh, he played at Oklahoma, won a championship there. He was able to win last year in Norman, but this year, Brent Venables, he brings his team down and they get the win in Knoxville. Um, the way the game started, I thought it was going to be a long night for the Sooners. Tennessee was driving the ball pretty easily. And then my favorite play of the weekend occurred. The Sooners, they sent Heineke off the edge. He sacks Aguilar, causes a fumble, and R. Mason Thomas, he's able to scoop it up. and make a big boy run to the end zone. He pulls a hammy on the way, but he put the team on his back, and a teammate was able to help him out, and they got into the end zone and scored on that. So excellent big boy energy there. This Oklahoma defense was a big theme when it came to writing the story on how the Sooners was able to win this game. Tennessee outgained Oklahoma 255 yards to 99 by halftime, but Oklahoma led 16-10. The 2 interceptions by the Sooners defense in the second quarter also led to 2 short fields and 2 field goals for Oklahoma. The second quarter was brutal for Tennessee. Before the 2 interceptions, they also had a missed field goal. So that kicker's having a rough year, by the way. Shout out to Tate Sandel, the kicker for OU. This game was won by 6 points, so the field goal kicking game ended up being very important tonight. He was 4 for 4 with his Daisy Dukes on, including that 55-yarder that was hit, and that allowed him to actually, he holds the record for the longest field goal made in Neyland. So, Aaron, what do you make of John Mateer's performance on Oklahoma's offensive side?
Yeah, it initially was a slow start. You didn't really see anything going at first, but you know, he got the offense rolling later when it really mattered, right? He ended with 0 touchdowns and 1 interception, but he was a difference maker with his legs. He was a big contributor to the Oklahoma, win, and was the facts that he was finally not leading rusher was amazing. Xavier Robertson, he had a huge night running the ball. Tennessee, they had a lot of trouble stopping him. It helps keep drives alive and keep the inconsistent but explosive Tennessee offense off the field.
Yeah, that was pretty key there.
Uh-huh.
Here's a fun question: do you think Venable's job is safe for now?
Ooh, that's tough. I think it's pretty much safe for now. I mean, he's doing what I think every college football fan base or school wants, and that's to be in the running and compete for a college football playoff spot. So I think he's doing a pretty good job, standing up pretty strong in the SEC. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. So speaking of, those teams standing strong in the SEC, our next game is, number 9 Vanderbilt going to Texas and, getting beat by the Longhorns. Texas pulled away early in this one. Vandy, they mounted a very impressive comeback in the fourth quarter, though, with 21 unanswered points. It was just a little too short. This was our underdog pick of the week. Vanderbilt was getting 2.5 points, and they lost by 3. It was a bad beat on our part, and we are now 5-6 in the season. Other than the outcome of the game, it was a very even game and performance for both teams. There was almost the same amount of first down, third down efficiency, yards, and passing, which, considering Arch's performance earlier in the season, this is great to see from him. It seems like he's finding a rhythm.
Great improvement. Yep.
Exactly. All right. Texas was a whole yard per rush attempt better than Vandy, and was -1 in the turnover battle. So that's what was ultimately needed to get the 3-point victory. Arch was able to come back from the concussion protocol, like you said earlier, and play in this game. He finished the game with 25 for 33 passing attempts for 328 yards and 3 touchdowns with 0 interceptions. It was kind of nice to see him, on this first drive back from injury. He connected on a 75-yard touchdown pass with Ryan Owingo on the first play from scrimmage. Immediately, it set a tone of confidence for him and his team. Yep. This game was, a high pressure situation for Texas, but Arch, he really looked laser focused. He showed elite efficiency, especially on those quick throws, and it helped, gain confidence for him and fuel his offense. This is the Arch we expected to see at the beginning of the year. It's a huge development for Texas' hopes for the rest of the season, and I mean, you never know where they could end up if they continue to execute at this level.
The CFP committee is going to put them in there.
Yep. with this level of execution we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
Also, there was great performance by the Texas defensive line. The front seven recorded 6 total sacks and 10 tackles for loss. Very disruptive, and they delayed Diego Pavia, getting going from almost the entire game. We said last week, the game against Mississippi State finally made it look like Texas team had finally woken up and rose to the top balling that this team was made out to be in the preseason, right? Um, all that seemed true until the fourth quarter when Vandy started, taking this game by the horns and scored 21 points straight. The Texas defense couldn't stop anything, and on the offensive side, let's just say Texas is good to miss a field goal every game, and this game's missed field goal came in the fourth when they needed, any momentum back that they could get. Vanderbilt almost had the onside kick as well somehow, but the ball went out of bounds right when the game, was in its clutchest moment, and the game was basically over.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, my question to you, Mash, is, what was the biggest change you saw in Texas's offense this game, that made them look so different than the offensive outputs we've seen in, previous ones?
Yeah, I think even the coach, said it. It sounds simple, but the offensive line just did their job. Steve Sarkisian, he said that they provided Arch Manning the best protection that he's seen all year. They only allowed 1 tackle for loss against Vanderbilt's defense. The running game wasn't spectacular. I think 75 yards for Quintravian Wisner, their lead running back. But the pass protection was elite. And yeah, I think the output of this game was just different because this offense was able to do its thing. I mean, the defense has been keeping them in games for the whole season. I think the defense has been doing what they've needed to do. It's just Arch is kind of finding his rhythm now, and it led to it was pretty much a dominant win until Diego started doing his thing. But yeah, fortunately, the offense was able to dig a deep enough hole for Vanderbilt that they couldn't get out at the end. Cool. Well, moving along, we had Penn State going up to number 1 Ohio State and losing 14-38. Aaron mentioned it in the last episode. It would be interesting in the first half, and then probably the lid blown off in the second. At halftime, the game was 17-14. By the end of the game, Ohio State scored 21 more points, and Penn State had a punt, and interception. That's it. Credit to Ohio State's defense. Their game plan was simple but effective. Shut down Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, their best 2 running backs. They held their rushing attack to 1.8 yards per carry, including the sacks on the quarterback. If Ohio State and the defense was going to get beat, it was going to be through the air. They were going to make the new guy, Grunkmeyer, earn it, through the air. They had a couple of explosives here and there, but the passing attack was mostly, tame from the Penn State side. Julian Sayin, as Nick said, you have to be a dumbass to keep him on the bench. He was throwing bomb after bomb to Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. Their average yards per reception were 25 and 21, respectively. That's insane. Insane. That should be on a t-shirt. Sayin ended the game with 316 yards and 4 touchdowns. He, as of today, he jumped up to be the favorite Heisman odds as of this morning. So, Aaron, I was curious to hear from your end. What else can we learn about this Ohio State team as they inevitably, make it to the Big Ten game, make it to the playoffs? Do you think they've been tested all year, or is their talent level just still that high?
Sure, sure. So I think there's been, a couple of glimpses where they've been tested throughout the year. I mean, I can't take away the credit of Washington being a good team that challenged them this year. And you saw that glimpse of being tested in this game against Penn State. Penn State still has a very talented roster, right? Um, but I think one thing Ohio State does really well is keep their composure, right? Even if the game's close, it's not going their way, they are not going to let you just run away with this game and capitalize off of more mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
They stuck to what they do well, and that's exploiting those mismatches, at the wide receiver position with Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, and They just trust their defense in every way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
A defense that shuts down teams, only allowing 5.9 points per game. A little bit more this game, but I mean, we saw who this team truly was in the second half. Yeah. And so next on the list, we have Miami. They went down to SMU this weekend, and SMU stunned the Miami Hurricanes in overtime, 26-20. Um, like Mash said earlier, I predicted this game to
Yeah.
basically go this way. I didn't think it was going to be an overtime win, or didn't know how close it was going to be, but I mean, I just felt a warm fuzzy of Miami's not all the way there this
Mm-hmm.
year. Um, the superior talent level of Miami was wiped away by two critical interceptions by Carson Beck. You know, mainly the one in overtime at the goal line, and also the 12 penalties they had for 96 yards. Yeah.
Guess who had both? Okay, you picked the winner of the game. You got it. But guess who had both of the picks against Carson Beck? I mentioned his name in the last episode as a safety to watch out for. Do you remember his name?
I do
It
not.
was Ahmed Moses. That's the safety. I said, watch out for him. He's going to be out there like a hawk. And he ended up with both interceptions. So
Wow.
I just want credit. I just want credit.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
It's all about, those key players that we call out. Big time players make big time plays in big time games, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he definitely stepped up for his team when he needed to. Um, for Miami, this loss really solidifies the sentiment that although Mario Cristobal is an elite recruiter and he can bring a lot of talent together, he folds from a coaching perspective of later in the season, right? But Mario can't control interceptions, right? As as Carson Beck said, he's just following plays that's giving to him. SMU, they did a couple of really nice things on offense in regard of their own. Kevin Jennings had an outstanding passing game. He threw for 365 yards and a touchdown. But that's about it for him. He didn't really do much of his legs. He averaged under 1 yard per carry rushing the ball. I know, he took a hit or two and he had a lingering injury on his ankle, I think. So that probably limited him in mobility in the third quarter
That
on.
was the team average. That wasn't just him. That was the team average.
Oh, okay.
Under 1 yard per carry. Yeah.
Wow. So, yeah. I mean, just
Miami's
overall,
defense completely shut that down.
yeah, shut down the run game pretty well, but they just couldn't shut down the passing game fully, right? But with that being said, SMU, they needed every squeeze of juice out of those two interceptions to win this game by 6, right? We'll talk about the playoff bracket later, but Miami is probably squarely out of the picture at this point.
Yeah, even though they were, I mean, not just an ACC favorite, they were a natty favorite at one point, right? But the ACC picture it's becoming more and more interesting by the week, and I think a lot of that has to do with Georgia Tech, who we're about to talk about right now. I think were they number 8, Georgia Tech at NC State. They ended up losing 36-48. Here's a very interesting story. NC State has been able to beat the top 2 ACC teams, Georgia Tech and Virginia. And I think that's their only 2. They have one more ACC win, but that's it. We did not see this as a potential upset for this weekend. With Georgia Tech's loss, there are no longer any remaining ACC teams that are undefeated. This will definitely have a major impact on the playoff implications, as the only ACC team to most likely make the playoffs will be the one conference champion. So it's looking unlikely that there will be an at-large bid left for the ACC. What we thought, if and when Georgia Tech lost a game this season, we thought it was going to be by shutting down Haynes King. He's clearly the engine of this offense. He still had a great game, though. 408 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and add another 103 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Like, that seems to be like a walk in the park for him at this point. Those are his numbers. What did NC State do well that enabled them to win this game? I mean, they were able to this was a high scoring game. They were just able to outshoot Georgia Tech in this one. They ran the ball with extreme dominance. They had 243 rush yards, 4 rushing touchdowns on the ground. They were averaging 7.1 yards per carry. So every 2 carries, that's a first down. This allows an offense to be able to do so much because the basics of a good defense is to stop the run, right? And clearly Georgia Tech wasn't even able to do that. Jaden Scott, running back for NC State, he had a season high 24 attempts and 196 rushing yards. The quarterback CJ Bailey, he did his thing. He threw for 340 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. These stats kind of explain why the NC State punter only saw the field twice the whole game. Every other possession ended with a score for NC State Wolfpack. So all in all, not a good look for the Georgia Tech defense yesterday. They were just getting gashed over and over. They need to go back to the drawing board and reevaluate, what they need to do in order to produce more stops. There's a lot more games left this season. They have playoff hopes are alive for them. They are still, in the top 3 within the ACC standings. But they do have a good Pitt team ahead, and Georgia is still on their schedule. So they need to figure that out before the end of this season.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. Speaking of Georgia, man, they played a classic in the largest outdoor cocktail party. Got
Yep.
it right on the first time. That's not.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, what would be a UGA game this year without multiple controversial calls by the refs?
Yep.
So, there's the infamous catch, no catch play. It looked like it bounced off the ground in live view. But
No
no
bias.
camera.
That's what I saw.
Yeah. No camera angle showed, irrefutable evidence that it didn't. DJ Lagway with the fumble, no fumble. From my eyes, it kind of looked like there was movement before anything touched the ground, but again, it's however the officiating crew determines that. The fumble forward pass by Gunnar Stockton, that was really a bang bang play. That was on the field, and the
What was
clapping
that
by
call?
Gunnar.
What was that call? That was on the field. That was called a fumble, or that was called a forward pass.
I think that one was overturned. I feel like it was called a
Okay.
fumble and they overturned it. But
Okay. Okay.
it seems so bang bang that I felt like you almost couldn't overturn that. Yep. The clapping by Gunnar Stockton to get a false start. I think that's the first time I've ever seen a penalty like
I know
that.
they said that's like something they talked about in the summer. Bro, what? I've never. Even I think the commentators said they never saw anything like that. That was crazy to me.
Yeah. And then, ultimately, the UGA game is, this season has been infamous for the late game heroic and coming back from a deficit against a team you're supposed to blow out of the water, right? I think Kirby, the first words he said on his post-game interview was, these guys are the cardiac kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is UGA's 4th game that they've won while trailing or tied at the half. That's the most in the nation. If you had to point out somebody who is a key contributor to these comebacks, these wins, these performances to keep them alive in the playoff hunt, I think you got to point out Zachariah Branch, right? He's absolutely amazing right now. I'm not sure where this Georgia offense would be without him right now. It's very up in the air how far UGA makes it in the postseason, but I think that will determine if he ends up being, one of the most impactful players in transfer portal a transfer portal edition this year, right? Just amazing clutch catches, especially on 3rd down. In the absence of Kobe Young not being there, he's had to step up even more. On the offensive side of the ball for Florida, right? You saw Jaden Ball. He single-handedly kept his team, in the game as they were missing some offensive starters that were really key. He had 72 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground, and 17 yards through the air. But it seemed like every single time he touched the ball, it was, a first down or close. His yards after contact had to be really high last game. It seemed like, these Georgia defenders were having a tough time bringing him down.
Yeah.
He's a very aggressive and elite runner. Fun fact, I heard Glenn Schumann, he actually was recruiting him to
Mm.
come to Georgia to play in high school, but Glenn wanted him to play linebacker. And he
Uh-huh.
was like, "No, I want to go take my talent somewhere else and I want to play running back."
Gotcha.
Man, he is showing why
Yeah.
he made the right decision of betting on himself. So
Nice.
definitely want to give kudos to Jaden Ball for that. Um, Gunnar Stockton, this might have been one of his worst performances this season, up until the fourth quarter, as you know, is just Georgia fashion this year. Mike Bobo, he turned on that switch, and Gunnar became Superman again. He made all the right throws, all the right reads to get this team to score just enough points to win the game.
That I texted you that kneel down on the 1 yard line. The
Yeah.
FBI going to investigate that man. But like as you said, it's high level IQ. In all honesty, that's a little bit more insulting to me. Like instead of scoring, like nah, I could score, but I'm just gonna go ahead and drop the ball right here.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just keeps the game fully in your control at that point. It's
Yeah,
like, okay,
right.
I'm gonna
They
win
had
the
no
game right
timeouts
here.
left. Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah. To get to that point, the defensive stands the UGA team made, that they were really good. Florida had plenty of chances to, ice this game, but they were 2 of 11 on third down conversions and 0 for 2 on fourth down conversions. So really, really great stand and statistics that Georgia's defense really is not performing well in. Third down conversions are, where they've struggled at. So it was refreshing to see them, have an impact in this statistic in this category. Um, you got to make those if you want to cut the head off the snake, on the latter end if you're Florida, though. Yep. But with all that being said, good teams, they find a way to win, and bad teams, they find a way to lose. So it seems like that's what happened. This game was pretty evenly matched, but it came down to a couple of key determinants, and those are one of them.
yeah. All right. So we've talked a lot about good teams today. Let's talk about which of them are going to make it into the CFP bracket, right? So you're going to have CFP, rankings, but those rankings aren't necessarily going to translate into the bracket. So we want to talk about the bracket itself.
Mhm.
Number one, Ohio State. Currently, they're 8-0. We have them, winning the Big Ten. I don't think that any explanation is needed. They've handled their schedule convincingly. I don't see them moving from this spot the rest of the season. Number two, Indiana Hoosiers. They're 9-0 at the moment. Same thing as Ohio State. Top two spots are going to be going to the Big Ten. It looks like you could make an argument that Indiana's number one. We'll figure that out in the Big Ten game. I thought their win at Oregon was more impressive than any win Ohio State has had this season. But whatever, 1-2. I'm sure they're not losing over any sleep over it. Similar case for 3-4, Texas A&M Aggies. I got them at number 3. They're 8-0. They're the only undefeated team left in the SEC, but more importantly, they have ESPN's number one strength of record. So very impressive schedule and what they've been able to do with it. Number 4, Alabama. They're 7-1. We have them winning the SEC. They've got the one fluke loss at the beginning of the season. If they win the SEC, they might jump up to 3 or something. But in any case, we'll get to that point when we get there. But they've been on fire ever since that FSU loss. They've had a string of it was like 4 or 5 top 25 games that they all won. So very impressive turnaround by Alabama so far this season. Number 5, I've got Oregon, another Big Ten team. They're 7-1. Their only loss was a home loss to the number 2 team. Other than that Penn State game, they've had every other game, solidly under control. But even in that Penn State game, they were playing a very talented team who had everything to play for. They still had their head coach at the time. They were playing at Penn State across the country. I think Oregon is a solid number 5 team heading into the CFP. Number 6, I got UGA. Their record is 7-1. Honestly, can easily be 3-5. But that's why they're high on the list because, like you said earlier, Aaron, good teams find a way to win. Their only actual loss is to number 4 Alabama, which quality loss as they call it. That's my top six. Aaron, do you want to share what we decided for 7 through 12?
Yeah, yeah. So starting with number 7, we got 8-0 BYU. This is another team, with a questionable schedule, but you have to give credit where credit is due, right? They keep winning their games, including a close one against Utah a couple of weeks ago. Bear Balkenmeyer, right? He keeps doing his thing. Um, uh, if he keeps doing it, a college football playoff appearance, in your freshman year would be super impressive for the young quarterback. Yeah, so they just have to keep winning. At number 8, you have 8-1 Ole Miss, right? They had one close road loss against a top 10 team. They have some deficiencies on defense, but their offense almost always finds a way to pull them out of a hole, you know, whenever they're put in one. At number 9, you have 8-1 Texas Tech, our dark horse, a very strong team that ranks very high on offense and defense. They have a game against BYU coming up this weekend, so maybe one of these teams will get knocked out. Texas Tech is looking a little shaky with all the movement, and injuries in the QB room. So see the comes this weekend out of that. At number 10, we have 6-2 Notre Dame. They had 2 losses in the beginning of the season. It really hurt Notre Dame's resume. But CJ Carr, he's been really impressive as a first year starter, and they have one of the best running backs in the country right now out of Jeremiah Love. So seems like they figured it out since then, since the 2 drops at the beginning of the season. And I think that's why they're still a top 10 team with, 2 losses on the season. At number 11, man, we have Georgia Tech. They dropped a little bit. They're a one-loss team, but we still think they can win the ACC. If not, then this spot will likely be taken by one of the other teams competing for that ACC championship. You have Virginia, you have Louisville. Heck, you could possibly even have Duke or SMU. It just all depends on how it plays out.
Yeah.
But Georgia Tech, they have Haynes King, and he's a super weapon, right? And then lastly, to fill in that last spot, we're thinking it's going to be, that winner of the American Conference, which is Memphis. Memphis looks really good right now. Other than that one blemish they had, they look to be the team that's going to come out for the Greater Five.
Yeah. And so for our first 2 out, we think it's going to be, Miami and Utah. They're just haven't won enough games, but that anything can happen in the top 12. So we'll see how that goes. So that's everything for this episode. For the next episode, we'll come back. We'll preview week 11. We got number 8 BYU at Texas Tech. That's a game I have to watch. Number 2 Indiana at Penn State. That'll be good. Auburn at Vanderbilt. Auburn's playing with the interim head coach. LSU's at Alabama. They're playing with the interim head coach. So lots to talk about, lots of fun ahead. We'll get into that on Thursday. Appreciate you guys watching First and Short. See you guys next time.